Hello, everyone. That set started soon, and then it started really soon. Lo, do you not have a camera? Oh, there you are.
You got it. Yeah.
All right.
Just a little slow on the uptake.
It's all good. Welcome, everyone. We are live with the folks from Arke, and we have a whole delegation of awesome people here that we will soon go over who does what and what is this all about. Welcome. Lo, why don't you kick all that off?
Yeah. So welcome everybody to the stream Pulse for Developers. Today we have an awesome stream. We're going to be talking about command line magic. And I want to welcome the Arke crew. So we have Patrick, who is the CTO. We also have Chris, who is the lead engineer. And we have Rodrigo, who is the head of Arke Brazil. So you folks want to introduce yourselves? Why don't we start with Patrick?
Well, hi, thank you for the introduction. Really excited to be here. It was great meeting with you guys at ContentCon. I think you already said it. My role at Arke is CTO. I oversee our development team, BA, QA. Maybe Rodrigo, you go next.
Cool. Yeah. Rodrigo Peplau is my name. I worked with Arke since 2023 and always with the mission to build this team in Brazil. Arke has a big commitment of working in the same time zone, very similar culture. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
You have such a good background, by the way.
I know.
Tell me this is real.
No.
The real one is better.
Oh, there we go. Nice. Sorry to interrupt. Chris, it's you.
Excellent. So yes, my name is Chris Nielsen. I am a technical lead here at Arke Systems. I've been with Arke for about 10 years. I've been doing development work for closer to 20 years. In that time, I've been all up and down the development stack from back end to front end, mobile development, database administration, cloud stuff in general. I'd say over my career, I've largely focused on CMS systems, started with a homegrown CMS and then burgeoned up into Sitecore for a while and now branching out into headless CMSs, most definitely focusing on content stack for a while now. Over the past 5 or 6 years, I've been leading up the front-end development team here at Arke. And by that, I mean, we do a lot of React, a lot of Next.js, and occasional Node on the back end, that sort of technology stack. So,
do you consider yourself a full stack now, or do we still not know what that actually means?
That has been a very loaded term. I have
yes.
Like when I started, we didn't make such distinctions. At least in the company I started with, we didn't have front end and back end. We just had devs, and you were expected to do everything. Now we have this distinction between back end and front end, and I don't know. I kind of twig out when people call themselves a front-end developer because the ones that I've met, I don't know. It's a lot to ask of somebody. It's a common label to find, but not a common person to find. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally true.
Chris, I just found out recently that I am considered a middle stack engineer. Because I work in the back in the back of the front because I've mainly done CMS configuration and integration tools.
Chris undersells himself just a little bit. He has been instrumental, I would say, in the last 5 to 6 years in Arke's pivot. We started out as a .NET development shop, right? So that's been our story for a long time. But Chris really kickstarted our front-end development team, and that team is huge now. It's grown and overtaken the size of our .NET team.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Awesome.
And so when a team like that grows, you apparently need a bunch of CLI tools.
Yes.
So I kind of forcibly made a bridge here to
Did it.
see what we talk about.
Nailed it.
I see what you did there.
Well, it's
CLIs have
it's-
been in our
yeah.
history, right, for a long time. And so who wants to
It's
take a
true.
stab at actually explaining what a CLI is?
Well, I'll be happy to talk about that a little bit. I know that CLI tools in general play a fairly major role, I would say, especially in the technology stack that I tend to work in the most. A lot of it gets done in, well, I'm on a Windows laptop right now, but I spend 90%, 95% of my development time in a Linux system,
Yes.
SSH'd in, and it's just like that's how my development flow works. I'm in the CLI constantly. It is a bit of a shift. I have spent a lot of time in other development stacks, and using more GUI tools is the norm in other environments. But if you're doing a lot of React, a lot of Next.js development, you're using the CLI. Like, if you're starting up Storybook, that's a CLI command. If you're starting up your Next.js system, that's a CLI command. If you're working with CI/CD and you're building out pipelines, chances are you've got some CLI commands in there somewhere. Actions only cover so much. So that's an important part of the flow. And it really just means being comfortable with the terminal, being comfortable with what commands are out there. Once you get used to it, it makes a lot of things a lot easier. It becomes definitely a productivity bonus to be able to string multiple commands together, have them execute, and have a lot more flexibility than you would otherwise have.
It
Yeah,
really
'cause it's
helps
like
us also. Oh, sorry, go on, Lo. You go
I was
first.
just gonna say it's an efficiency thing too. Like once you become like a super user or very comfortable in the terminal, it's much faster to use the CLI sometimes for some things, right? And I always say
Absolutely.
so I'm primarily self-taught developer, but I took a few classes, right? And the one that I have used throughout my career has been I took a Unix class, and it was just about getting comfortable in the terminal, moving around CLIs and writing scripts. And it's the one thing that like I go back to that education every time.
Absolutely. It really is. And I remember that point in my development career when I started transitioning into the terminal, and it's a night and day difference in terms of how quickly I can execute commands and how quickly I can just string something together and have a script run something through. It's a pretty massive productivity boost once you get used to it.
And so maybe before diving in what you guys actually built, it might be interesting to talk a little bit about how at Arke, at your agency, you actually use these CLI tools for your governance and things like that. I see Rodrigo's camera is on loading spinner, so maybe Patrick, you want to take that one.
One more time on that question, Tim. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about how in your agency, on the process side of things, on the governance side, how you use these CLI tools and how that makes you, more successful faster?
Well, I think one way that we use this tool that we've developed is to put schemas from content stack into source control, right? So now the code and the content types from content stack that are dependent upon each other, they interact with each other, they're now all under source control. And the value of this is when we go through a pull request and we do a code review, right, you have those two things side by side. And that's important. That means that there's less chance of some sort of mistake or coordination problem between multiple developers, because at the end of the day, you've got probably a team of devs. They're all working from the same code base, and those content types interact with different parts of the code. And so we need to be in sync on that. And this tool allows us to do that.
And so did you feel like building this tool because that's kind of how it used to work? Because you can also in Content Stack, for example, make a branch for, let's say you make a new feature, you make a branch, and that's where your changes are, and then use whatever automations Content Stack has when you merge. I'm not saying you have to, but you can. And so where did it come from that you decided, let's build this thing rather than let's use that thing?
I think it came from prior experience with other CMSs. I know Rodrigo could speak to this. Rodrigo's got a lot of experience from TDS, Sitecore, Unicorn. Rodrigo, do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we kind of take that for granted in those platforms that you are developing not just the code, but you are serializing schema and content types so that you can distribute them as part of the whole code itself. You can version that, you can visualize history of that, and which makes much easier to just spin up a new instance and having your code running without relying on any manual operations. Not to mention that you can, as part of command line, you can implement your scripts and automate your stuff. It's also very important for the CI/CD integrations, where you can just promote these things naturally as part of just your code. Comes with the type with itself, and sometimes even some minimal content to make your code happen. So in other platforms like Sitecore that you mentioned, you take that for granted, and the command line interface is for most developers the most natural way to interact. Back in the days, not just because an old guy, it was the only one. CLI was computers, right? So for us, most of us, it's natural, and I think that's why we take for granted.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see when you move from a more monolithic system that you kind of manage on-prem yourself. So you have your pipelines and all the things you can do towards something that's in the cloud, like a SaaS. Suddenly the whole vibe switches, but you can still use CLIs, right? But in your mind, it might have switched so much. It's like, oh, now it's services and management APIs. I'll do it that way.
Yeah.
But there's also a reason why we at Content Stack have built a CLI with slightly different features than yours. So that's why this works so well.
I think
Patrick, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think philosophically, as developers, we're very used to having source control be the source of truth. That's drilled into us from very, very early on. So that this kind of workflow scratches that itch. I also think this is kind of a minor observation, but probably worth knowing. When you make a branch in Content Stack, you are basically doubling whatever content type count you have. And that may or may not be important for you, but it's something to be aware of.
Yep.
Every branch, right, you're making a copy of those content types, and so you're increasing your content type count. And that could be a consideration.
Yeah, and at scale, sometimes, like we've seen, that's why this is such an interesting conversation, because we have customers that do this at scale without a CLI tool, but all with scripts that would then essentially just make a new branch, look at the delta of the difference of the content, and then apply it with the API. And sometimes, because they have 500 sites in one organization, and then one branch creation, sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes 30, and they might do 200 at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so in different setups, you can be pragmatic in different areas and it works fine, and otherwise it's harder again. And so sometimes doing it through a CLI in a slightly different, management style, that might work much better. And that's why I love how open all this stuff is, right? Your CLI just uses our management API in the way you want, and just run, and it kind of just works. Unless, like, of course, when you start hammering APIs, it will just say at one point no, and then you deal with it.
Yeah. And, back to the pull request, code review cycle, being able to have someone, your lead dev or another dev who's knowledgeable, review your content model changes can provoke a thoughtful discussion.
Yeah, great. I think we just lost Chris.
Looks like we did.
Yeah, maybe some sort of an internet thing. However, we do want to go to actually talk about what this CLI tool is that you built.
Yes.
Tiptoed around it. It's time now. We're 15 minutes in.
Yes.
Yeah, because I want to see it in action.
So I think we have Chris back now.
I think he's back.
Here he
Yes.
is.
Right on
Welcome
time.
back.
We want to see some
Sorry,
stuff.
I had technical issues on my end apparently.
We just wanted some drama on the stream, you know, a little bit of free song just to keep us all engaged.
Yes, no doubt, no
I
doubt.
think this is the moment you share your screen because you had a few slides you wanted to go over, right?
Yes.
I did, yes, and apologies. My audio cut out. I've missed like most of what you guys were talking about for the last little bit. So sorry if I'm going
It's
to
all
cover
good.
something that y'all just talked about. But yes, I do have some things to share. Let me go ahead and I have a short presentation, and it just kind of talks about Beacon, what Beacon is, why it exists, that sort of thing.
Awesome.
All right, so I think I'm sharing again now.
Yeah,
so
it's working.
You're good to
excellent. Beautiful. Okay, so what is Beacon exactly, right? So as we were talking about, Beacon is a command line tool that we use to work with content types and entries inside of Content Stack. And so really, we built Beacon because we had a desire to keep our data schema under source control, to be able to deploy that schema as part of a CI/CD pipeline, right? So this is a command line tool, and its purpose and reason for existing is that it can serialize and deserialize stack content, right? So anything including content types, global fields, entries, assets, taxonomies, anything related to that.
Okay, so it's not just content types, it's actually also the content itself.
Yes, it can absolutely serialize the entries as well, right? Okay. And deserialize them successfully. So we'll talk about that as part of a workflow a little bit later, because I think it enables some very interesting options in terms of how you want to work and how you want to manage your content, right? But primarily, what we wanted to support here is a developer experience of being able to manipulate and test schema changes as part of working through a component, right? So ideally, the ways that we would prefer a developer to be able to work with this is a developer should be able to work with both the schema and the component together as one unit of work, and then submit both of those for code review as part of one PR, as part of a package. And then, you go through the code review process, people leave comments on it, people have a way to look at the schema changes before they get applied to higher environments. And then when it's done, it's integrated into your CI/CD toolchain, and then it gets pushed up into a higher environment, schema and code together. So,
and so before you go to the next, does it have like certain features for, let's say a field was removed or changed? Of course, if there's content on that field already that exists in the database, will you then just lose that? Or like, how does it work? Is there some sort of management there? I know this is a painful question,
yes.
But it has to be
no, it's not painful at all. In fact, that's the current guidance on that is that as part of doing a code review, the people looking at the code are supposed to look at the schema changes and say, hey, you're removing a field here. Let's take a look at that. What are the consequences of removing this field, right? Because it's the same problem that you face if you remove the field through the Content Stack UI. If the field has data and you remove it, it's gone.
Exactly.
And
actually, it's not gone, but it's dangling. Well, let's call it like that.
Yes.
Yes.
The data is there, but there's nothing.
Yeah.
Is there a deprecation process in the CLI tool?
Not as part of the CLI tool, no, but we do, we use this tool on client projects, and we do have deprecation procedures in place, right? So the way we handle that is just through a development workflow. We say, hey, we're going to make a substantial change. We're going to remove a field. We will mark that field as deprecated in our code. And then Beacon, because it has the ability to, I think this is also possible in the Content Stack UI. You have a very extensive search interface, but I will tell you the way I've been doing it. Beacon has the ability to serialize entries from a stack, all entries. And so if I want to deprecate something and I want to remove a field, the process that I've been following is I will point Beacon at the production stack, pull down all the content, all of the entries. Let me see what is out there, what has been published, and where is it. And then I can open up VS Code and do a full text search over that entire serialization, and I will find everywhere that UID has been used. And I will know this field is being used on these specific entries. And I can say to the developer, hey, this field is still in use. We can't delete it yet. So that's part of the workflow. Right? Like when I'm saying, let's do a code review and note, hey, we are going to remove a field. We don't want to do that unless we are sure that it's not going to cause any problems.
Right.
That's how I check.
It's really interesting that you're combining now much more that content and code is kind of the same package. And it's been a while that I saw that folks are doing that. It actually makes a ton of sense, right?
Oh, I certainly think
Content
so.
comes with a feature normally.
Right. Yes. I mean, from my perspective, the way that we are writing our components, we are relying extensively on code generation. Either using the REST API, we will generate TypeScript types that model the output of the REST API, or we will use GraphQL CodeGen if we have a project using the GraphQL endpoint.
Sure.
Either way, we are generating types based on the schema that exists inside of Content Stack. And those types inform the code. So when we are writing code, when we are writing components, we want to make sure that our CodeGen is in place. And if our CodeGen is in place, then we cannot write code that does not compile against our schema, because TypeScript will stop us, right? It'll throw a compile error. If we are,
this field doesn't exist, stop it, please.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what's actually interesting to bring up here is that, for example, the Content Stack CLI has this stuff too. There's like a TSGen plugin. We have all that stuff. And the more, the merrier. So now developers get to choose to either use Beacon or ours, and it kind of just use what you like. And that's a very important part of having a partnership like this, where there might be a bit of overlap, but that's actually totally cool. Because you might have done it slightly differently than us.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, actually, that's a very interesting point. Beacon in general does not do CodeGen, and it makes no assumptions about how you are going to generate types, or if you were going to generate types. I'm certainly aware of the TSGen. We actually have something called CSGen that also generates types based on the REST API. I think they both do a pretty decent job. When we are using the GraphQL endpoints, we use an off-the-shelf tool called GraphQL CodeGen.
Yeah, I use that too. That's great also.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's just an introspection thing.
Yes, exactly. It does introspection and it works wonderfully. But because those options are so varied, I kind of look at that as a separate problem, like CodeGen based on your types. That's not Beacon's domain, but it's definitely designed to work under the assumption that you're going to have something along those lines.
And nothing says like for the future potentially, because you were like talking about, hey, this UID is already used and things like that. Like the Content Stack CLI recently got a lot of like audit tools for like when you're importing again. It kind of looks at like, hey, is there circular dependencies and bunches of things like that? And so in the future, you might actually want to tap into that, and then these two actually extend each other. Like there's so much that can be done here. It's super interesting.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's some interesting things to talk about there as well. I know that circular dependencies or circular references are an interesting problem inside of Content Stack. I'll give you some insight here. The Beacon under the hood is using the Content Stack Management API to import and export content types. And of course, content types and global fields are allowed to reference each other. And there's issues with trying to import a content type before the content types that it references have been imported. It's going to give you problems. Beacon has ways to deal with that. And it handles the circular references. It's able to deal with that sort of situation. And it will give you warning messages. Actually, it's able to handle circular references perfectly well. If you were trying to work with, for instance, entries, and an entry references something and the thing that it references has been deleted, it's able to handle that as well, but it will give you this kind of feedback like, hey, I'm going to serialize all this content, but you're referencing something that has been deleted. So when you try to deserialize, in other words, when you try to push it back up, you're going to have it's not going to be one-to-one, right? Like it'll do a best effort, But if the data's not there when it serializes, it won't be there when it deserializes either. That's, it'll tell you these things and give you some feedback, but that's only so much it can do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, our tool does similar stuff, and we know this pain. And this is part of the game of being developer. Right? Data is just this is the game. So sorry to keep asking you questions. Maybe go to the next slide, and at one point you're just going to show it.
Yeah.
Sure,
I'm just
sure,
excited.
absolutely.
That's how that goes.
Yep. Let's see. All right. So we have this idea that, and this comes from working in prior CMS environments, that a development team will have multiple stacks working together, right? So this kind of workflow sort of implies that you'll have at least one stack for your higher environment, meaning QA, UAT, prod, or whatever, and then each developer will have a dedicated development stack for them if they are doing content modeling. And so Beacon gives you a way for every developer to keep their own personal stack under control, right? Like they're able to make changes to their content types without needing to worry, hey, am I going to break something? Am I going to clobber some other, coworkers to work when they're working in the same area? They don't have those concerns anymore. And so that's enabling a different kind of workflow for them. And then also, of course, I talked about this a little bit earlier. We have this CI/CD integration. So Beacon is really designed to work in this sort of workflow as well, right? So once you have serialized your content types into source control, those go through your code review process. Beacon is intended to be part of your CI/CD integration. As a command line tool, it's very easy to integrate that into whatever pipeline system you have. And once a unit of work has been completed, as part of your CI/CD, Beacon is used to push those changes into your higher environments, right? So in your CI/CD, you'll be feeding it the management token associated with your higher environment stack, tell Beacon to push your content up. And then in this way, your schema that's serialized to source control becomes the single point of truth for what your project's schema is supposed to be. So always in sync.
So this is going to be some kind of, when you make a new feature, it becomes a branch, and then you want to merge the branch, and then this is kind of part of also the checking if everything works. But then also after it's merged, it does a bunch of stuff.
That's right, right. So the general flow there is once your PR merges in, you'll have some sort of action that takes place when something hits the develop branch or QA or main or whatever you want. However your setup is configured. And then Beacon will apply those at that time.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I have a question. So have you yet encountered or used Beacon on like a multi-tenancy architecture or multi-brand situation? And like, if so, how did you approach that?
I have not encountered that yet. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just, because I was looking at the diagram and listening to you, and it seems like you could use this, but it would be, maybe you would have to do some slightly different architecturing of this, but it seems like it would be possible.
Lo, when you say branch, do you mean content stack branch?
No, I mean multi-brand. Like, so let's say you have, instead of multi-developer stacks, you have stacks from different brands, but they are sharing some component code, but also sharing the schemas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we see it quite often that one brand could have 200 sub-brands that all have a crap ton of pages and then they all want to slightly change their own thing, but the base is the same. And then you have to somehow manage that.
We have done a project for a client where they wanted something like 50, call it, project sites within a single stack. And that team did use Beacon for that. So I don't think it's quite maybe what you're describing, Lo, but it's in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's always fun when you throw scale at something to see how it works.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reason I asked about branch there, I misheard brand for branch. I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to just talk about Beacon's ability related to content stack branches?
Sir? Yes, Beacon is branch aware in the sense that you can configure it to target a specific branch, and it will do so. Beyond that, though, branches are in content stack however you want to configure that. Beacon makes no particular assumptions about it, other than you have a configuration option. You can tell it, focus on this branch or that branch, and it will only apply changes or pull changes
that's
from that
by
branch.
far the safest bet.
Yes.
So, yeah, I can continue.
Yep.
Another use case here is backup and recovery. So that we are using this in a couple of clients as well, right? So as I mentioned, Beacon is fully capable of serializing a stack's contents, meaning the entries and assets as well. And it lets you handle the idea of managing your own full stack backups, right? So Beacon operates in a relatively incremental mode. It does need to index everything when it's first running, but once that index is run, it only pulls down entries that it believes have changed since the last pull, right? So this gives you a way to take all of the entries, all of the assets, all of the content types, everything, put it into your file system. And then from there, you can easily imagine workflows that let you do things like compares with the previous archive, or let's back these up somewhere, or perform audits on them. Whatever you want to do with them after that, they're in your file system, they're files. Not only are they files, but they are in YAML format, which is specifically chosen because it enables an easier human readability, right? So if you are a developer looking at this, it's not minimized in any way. It's, here's YAML, you can open it up, you can look at it, you can read it, that sort of thing. So that helps with the process. And then if you want to archive that, you can. It's relatively easy. So.
And could you grab an archive from last year and push it to a stack and it just works?
Yes, certainly.
And what happens if you already have new content there?
Wipes it out.
Ah, okay, yeah. So yeah, as long as you know, run it, right?
Yeah, no,
as long as you know.
It does exactly what it says. If you're restoring an archive, it's going to restore that archive. And if you have content there, actually, I should clarify, there's a little bit of nuance there. Beacon, by default, unless you tell it to, it will not delete your entries. There is, it will warn you about that. It will say, hey, I would have deleted this, but I didn't because you didn't pass the right flag. But there is a command line flag that says, go ahead and delete entries. I want what's in the file system to be what's in the stack. And in that case, in that mode of operation, it will wipe out. Whatever's in.
So is there is it doing some kind of diff process where it looks at what was here before? Is it time or date based? Will it let you know
No, that's a fascinating question, right? Because I spent a fair amount of time experimenting with that. No, it is not time and date based. It will pull down the entry, and then it is relatively intelligent about. Well, I think it's intelligent. I wrote the logic for it. But
that's the person who wrote it.
Yeah. A non-biased opinion here.
Right, obviously. But no, it will look at the contents of what is in content stack, and it understands that there are certain fields in content stack that might change, but do not represent a substantial change from an archive position, right? So among those are, when was this entry last published, or who was the last person to update this entry? It understands the difference between built-in system fields inside of content stack and fields that have been added because they are part of a content type. So it knows to look and compare fields in that way. It's got some additional logic when it's doing comparisons about how white space is handled, how missing fields compare to a field that is present but has an empty string value. Like, does that really count as a diff? It's got some nuance as far as that goes, but no, it's not just looking at the modified date and time. It's got some deeper logic than that.
Cool. That's really awesome.
When I look at this, you essentially, well, it's probably not very much the same, but it looks very much like Unicorn. So I'm going to throw it to Rodrigo, because these like if you use Sitecore or Content Stack, they're really quite different pieces of software. They have the same goal, but they get there differently, which is, everybody has their own awesomeness there. How does it feel using this with Content Stack? Does it feel like Sitecore related development? Like what is the vibe here for you? Is I come from that same background. That's why I'm asking.
Right. I think it feels at the beginning when you don't have it, it feels that you're missing something, because now you have to create your types, your metadata has to be exported manually, and you have to mail that or throw to someone on Teams. So it feels like you are missing something. And indeed, I think the reason we built this is because it feels like a big gap. And
interesting to know, because you're one of the first to actually mention that as a gap, but that's because you come from that background, of course.
Because we take, yes, that's our way we do traditionally, and you tend to think comparably to that. But I think we're bringing a lot of information here in this call to tell everyone that is indeed advantages of having that more a single source of truth and etc. And also helps you as a developer to think about the artifacts, not just the code, but the artifacts as a whole, the serialization included, that composes your building, the feature you're building, right? Absolutely, you're not abusing this. You're not using Unicorn, TDS, or our tool to do anything like touching content that belongs to the content editor. You're not supposed to do that. It's not taken as a good practice, let's say, because you can screw up things very easily. And I've been speaking to Chris. Features we'll be bringing is the ability to localizely serialize and unserialize, deserialize data in a certain part of the content only, certain schemas only, instead of like today we're refreshing everything and getting, of course, the analysis of deleting that if you force. But those are the way I think that compares to the way we do things in Sitecore. But at the same time, I understand why you didn't feel that gap, because you grow up doing things in a certain way that you don't have that, so you don't feel
it's very interesting. Like you mentioned the word artifact. I haven't used that since I used Sitecore last, because there's somehow something that you can hold in your hand, just like how you host Sitecore, and that you have the pipelines and you can code it yourself. But in the end, when we look at it from a distance, it's all kind of so similar. But it's fun. I have not heard the word artifact in a long while. And that's not a judgment. It means nothing. But it's just kind of fun how different crews that use different tooling have different words for this kind of stuff.
That is interesting, Tim. I think maybe bouncing back even to the earlier multi-tenant question. If you are putting more and more of the overall solution, which includes things beyond just code, into source control, then it makes it easier to start to think about how you can apply that same solution or a solution in a similar vein to more than one target environment, which could be
exactly
going down that multi-tenant path, right? So I think there's a lot of room with a tool like this to apply it to more complicated use case scenarios.
I would say the more you mature as a brand or an agency with more complex setups, this is going to help you a lot more. Like this is not used for beginners, but the moment you go slightly deeper, this actually accelerates you, which is very exciting.
Definitely. Okay, we only have like 20 minutes and I want to see the actual tool in action.
Chris, let's go, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a little bit to show here, right? So we are using this tool on, again, a number of projects. Can't necessarily share a client project, but we are using it to build the Arke.com redesign website. And I can show you a little bit about how this is organized. We have a React Next.js site, and so that's part of it. And then here under CS is where we are keeping our schema, right? So we have content types, global fields, taxonomies, and in this case, I also have assets and entries. You can see for this project, I'm not committing those to source control. They're not part of what we want to push up, right? So for higher environments, when I do a commit, I'm only committing my schema. I'm not committing my assets or entries, even though I do have them in my stack. So it can show you a little bit about what these files actually look like. You know, we have a variety of pages here. They have, again, once you are looking at these, this is in YAML. This is, I'm sure you're familiar with some of these field names. This is largely unchanged from what the management API is going to produce if you ask it to export a content type. There's going to be a couple of nuances there, but by and large, this is what you get. You can see I've also got taxonomies in here, and that's what's in the file system right now. I can show you that's also what is in my content stack. I'll swap over to that and show you how this correlates. You can see I've got all these content types here in my content stack. Wow.
There we go.
And so you can see the correlation between the components, right? So let's look and see, what does this look like if I'm a developer and I want to, for instance, let's make a change to one of these components. Let's go into my features grid, take a look at it, and we've got a grid, we've got some stuff here. I want to add, let's add a CTA, right? Call to action for this one. So I've added a new property to my features grid. And so let's save that, close that. And by the way, while I'm looking at this, you'll see I've got my name next to my stack, right? So this is my personal stack. This is my private development stack. We have stacks for everybody on the team, and we have a primary stack.
This is what you were just showing on your slide. Right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. So we have one stack that treats our higher environments. That's this arc.com. And then we have a stack for every developer who's currently working on the project. Right. So I can save this. I don't have to worry about, am I going to mess up somebody? Is it going to be a problem? It's not. It's not. It's just my personal stack. Right. So now I've made a change to a field. I can drop back in here. And I can do yarn, beep, and pull. And so it's going to connect to my stack, and it's going to pull down all of those changes. Right. So first thing it does, start looking at it, indexing everything, what's in there. Great.
This looks so fancy, dude.
I know.
Right?
I
I've
have
got
some work
colors.
to do. I'm the
got
PM
progress
for
bars. I've got a little graph here.
Look at
so many
this.
things.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I actually had some other changes. You caught me in the middle of doing some other development work, but I just changed my flexible hero. If I look in source control, well, it says it was created. I think that was actually a brand new component. So let's try. I bet my CTA is in here.
There it is. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, here's my CTA. But let's try one with an actual change now that I've synced up. So
Okay.
wonderful featured icon cards is in here. Let's add a CTA here as well. All of our things are going to have CTAs at the end of this. CTA. So we know what it is, right? Save that. Now let's run it again. Come back to my terminal.
Chris just wanted to show this interface one more time, the output.
Oh, totally. Right. So you can see it picked it up. Hey, you changed your featured icon cards. And then if I come into here, sure enough, there's my new field that's been added. So what I would do at this point is, you know, I want to go and edit my components. I want to make whatever changes are necessary to make this thing come up. And then I want to submit that out to a PR, have somebody look at it and work with it at that point, right? So let's.
And so did you just, how did it work with your TypeScript? Did that now also update, or do you have to do that separately?
I do that separately on this project. We do have GraphQL on this one, so I do
okay.
have a script for that.
Well, in that case, you just have to do, like a code gen.
Jen.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
code
okay.
gen, but that's outside of Beacon, right? So again,
Yes.
one of the things Beacon tries not to make assumptions about how you were doing that or if you were doing that, right? So there's a lot of ways to do it.
Exactly, and like we've noticed, there's a few things like, for example, when you turn on your visual builder stuff in Content Stack, there are some additional properties that you're going to need on the fields, and you want them in TypeScript. But when you don't turn those on, you don't want them in TypeScript, or at least have the question mark thing. And so
Right.
it is a little changeable. So I understand that you don't want to assume too much here.
Yes, indeed, that's certainly true. But yeah, again, we do have CodeGen working.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's separate from Beacon, but Beacon is designed with that in mind. It's designed under the assumption. Right. So go ahead.
One thing I noticed when you were making the changes previously, it looked like it was checking for RTE plugins.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Like
Yeah.
how you're handling that and what happens when there's like extra things on the RTI or like custom fields?
Great. No, a wonderful question. So yeah, one of the things that we have come across is that when you're in Content Stack and you have installed from the marketplace a plugin that affects either Content Stack as a whole or provides plugins for the JSON RTE. If you try to serialize those things, you're using the management API to pull down an entry that contains plugin specific data. That plugin is what you get out of the management API. It will serialize it, but it is associated with a UID that is assigned to the instance of the plugin on the stack on which it is installed, right? So every time, if it's not a problem to pull it down, but then if you turn around and you say, okay, now I've serialized this, I want to push it up to a different stack. Now you've got a problem because that UID is specific to the combination of a specific stack and a specific plugin. And once that UID is generated, if you just try to naively push it up, you're going to have problems because even if the other stack, if your target stack has the same plugin installed, it will have a different UID. So you've got to do something. You've got to map that, right? So Beacon handles that. There's a configuration option in Beacon where you can tell it, I've got these plugins installed on my stack, and they have these UIDs. And if you look in documentation, it shows you exactly how to derive these values, how to find them, and how to configure to handle this sort of situation. The way Beacon handles that is that when you're serializing, when you're pulling down stuff from your stack, and you notice, and Beacon notices that it's got a plugin in place and it's going to run into this problem, it will at that point map the UID to whatever value you have configured in your configuration. So instead of serializing the stack specific UID, it will serialize a stable value that then during the deserialization process, it's able to use the same configuration and say, oh, I see you have the whatever it is, Algolia, well, Algolia doesn't have a, anyway.
We do, but that might not be the right example. You're right.
This Binder, I think, does this.
Binder is the one that we originally ran into this on, but we solved it generically, right? So it'll say, oh, you've got Binder content on the target stack. Binder has a different UID. I'm going to map that at that point. And so it's able, that's what you're seeing when you see the what JSON plugins are installed, what other plugins are installed. It will echo that back to you as part of it.
Do you effectively use a management API to install a plugin? Is that what you do in the end?
No. Actually, interesting question. We made some attempts in that direction, but I thought it was overreaching for what Beacon was trying to do.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing.
I understand that it might be an interesting prospect to do that, because then you don't have to do all the jumping through a hoop backwards because of this UID thing.
Right. And it's interesting, on one of our projects, we were attempting to control the plugin state of the stack, also in source control. And it turns out it's definitely possible to do that, but I think it's overkill. I think that installing plugins is something that is out of scope for what Beacon is going to do. So what Beacon does in that situation is if you try to, for instance, you have serialized content in your file system that referenced a plugin originally. And if you try to push that out to a stack that doesn't have a plugin, Beacon will tell you. It will say, hey, I can't do this because target stack is missing the plugin. You've got to go install it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. So Beacon will tell you, will warn you about that, but it won't try to install the plugin itself. You've got to still do that.
One quick one. At Content Stack, I think it's been a while, but we now have variants for entries as well that you could use for personalization or other things, whatever, a variant. Do you have some sort of a feature that deals with those as well?
So there's nothing specifically that deals with variants in that sense. We haven't, the clients on which I've used this project have not used the variant feature yet. So I don't have a specific use case at this time, but it's definitely something that I want to be able to support, and I want to.
You're going to have fun with that because we store the deltas of the changes between the base variant and then the sub variant and then the different language. You're going to have some fun, but you might just want to look at the code of our CLI and just use it. It's fine.
Absolutely.
Or combine or whatever, because that's like all those kind of new things are coming out, of course, and as partners, we should be able to kind of talk together and just figure out that we don't do, extra work here. But there's a bunch of stuff like that. I have another one that's probably pretty hard. Let's say I have a JSON rich text field that's configured in a very complicated way. I even have my own plugins in it. And what comes out is JSON, of course. And in your front end, you might want to parse that JSON with either your own package or our package and make it into HTML. How do you store that stuff in your YAML files?
As the JSON.
Just JSON, but that's stringified, basically.
Oh, I see what you're asking. No, if you look at the JSON that gets output in that, very interestingly, that JSON will include UIDs for practically every node along the thing.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah.
And there's no way, at least there's no way that I know of, maybe you know something different, but there's no way that I know of that when you are deserializing, in other words, you're pushing that up into another stack, you can't really control those UIDs. So they show up as diffs. So remember earlier, I was talking about there's some nuance in terms of how Beacon compares two entries and whether or not it decides something is different. It understands that those UIDs are something that it shouldn't be looking at when it's comparing two entries. But the content, otherwise the content of the JSON, like it, when it's looking at an entry, the way that process works is it will have the schema as the content type defines it, and it will have the entry, and then it will go field by field down both. So it understands this field, oh, this is a JSON RTE field. I have special processing. So it will understand, hey, these UID values, they aren't relevant for
I just don't care. I grab the JSON and it's what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. And in general, we solve those sorts of things. My usual philosophy for that is to take an extremely light touch in terms of what is, there's an axiom here is that you want to be very accepting, very, very tolerant in terms of what you will accept, but very strict in terms of what you output. And so I try to follow that in terms of Beacon as well.
That makes sense. You're a bit like a browser where a website you built 30 years ago kind of still works. So you have to be very liberal of what you accept and then very strict of how you render. And so that's
exactly so.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that came to mind is in a rich text editor, the JSON one, you can do a reference to another thing and then render that in the rich text editor.
Yep.
But if you ignore the UIDs, you're not going to know. And so when that thing doesn't exist, you make a link that doesn't exist anymore when you re-upload. So there's going to be a lot of fun with that stuff.
But keep in mind, it's not ignoring the UIDs. It's ignoring them only for the purposes of diffing. And references inside of JSON RTE are handled exactly the same as they are for reference fields. In other words, when you are referencing something, Beacon understands the JSON RTE JSON structure, and it understands how to crawl down through all of the nodes and locate something that is a reference. And when it finds a reference, the way that is handled, because again, as you pointed out, the UIDs are not something that you can really control with content management API. So it's got to map that to something that it can control. So if you look at what is serialized for a JSON RTE value, if it's got a reference, or indeed if there is a reference field anywhere in the entry, what gets serialized is not the UID by Beacon, but rather a string in a particular format that says, it starts with $beacon or whatever, and then a slash, and then it has the title field for whatever is being referenced, right? So it's got a way to map that back, right? Because, and again, I realized after there's some edge cases here that Beacon understands and will warn you about, but by and large, for the most part, Content Stack successfully enforces the constraint that title fields must be unique within the context of their respective content type. So again, we found some exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, Beacon makes the assumption that it's okay to rely on that uniqueness quality, and therefore the title field can be used to map those references around. So that's how it's handled internally.
All right. So time is flying. I have
Yes.
two questions, of which one is fun and the other one is more serious. Which one do you want first?
Bring it on. Let's do this.
We'll start serious. We'll start serious. So let's say somebody watches this stream, is like, okay, I'm going to use this now as another agency or somebody who works with like 20 other customers. And they find something that like, hey, why didn't you have this? Or hey, this is broken. What do you guys kind of expect in terms of how that works? Do you want people to, make a PR? Do you treat this like a product and therefore people complain, and then until you have enough complainers, you make a new release? Do you release every day? Like, what is your process here?
Yeah, no, wonderful question. Beacon is open source. If you go to the GitHub, it is an open source project. I expect to run that like an open source project. In other words, submit an issue request in GitHub, submit a PR. I'm happy for PRs if you want to fork it, if you want to do your own thing. That's what open source means. So give me some issues, and I will. I would love to say that I will commit all of my time to working exclusively on Beacon, but Patrick,
here we go.
It will be worked into a support process. Like we are committed to making sure that Beacon is out there and is usable and is workable as far as that goes. But yes, you give us some issues, give us some PRs, go ahead and fork it. Let's see what happens. Let's work together.
That's great.
We talked about this internally some, right? And we just decided as a company, we don't want to deal with making a product and all of the hassle that comes with it.
We can tell you all the hassle that comes with that, by the way.
I know. And at the same time, we think there's value for this. We want to encourage the development community around Content Stack. We think Content Stack's a great product. So, why not? Let's open it up, and I think hopefully other people get value from Beacon. And if Beacon as a tool becomes better because people are contributing back to it, well, that's good for Arke too.
Yes, good for everyone. And so, how much vibe coding did you use to build this, Chris?
0.
I knew that answer. But I knew that.
No, I take that back. I have generated test cases using Copilot's agent mode. So I do
make your coverage go up. That's it, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, not just for the coverage tracking, but if you want. Look, guys, I have some opinions about vibe coding.
I know.
Yeah, I can tell.
I mean, it's great at generating test cases, and if you're very specific with it, it can take a lot of grunt work out. I will tell you, if you look in this project right now, we have tried to describe Copilot instructions, including at Beacon, right? So it's in here. I will say, I've tried to use this. I don't think I would trust exactly what an agent is outputting yet. And I don't know if that's because, like, Beacon is a relatively new tool. I don't know if it doesn't fully understand
Probably have
the
to make
YAML
an
format.
MCP server for Beacon and then tell it exactly what it can do in terms of toolings and resources, right?
Yes, I think really the answer there, if I can speculate, is you want your agent to be working with an MCP server,
Yes.
making the changes in your stack, and then use Beacon to pull those down.
Oh, that's
Right,
very
because
interesting.
if I ask right now, the agent will absolutely go into my CS schema directory and it will start editing these YAML files, which is
Oh,
fine.
wow.
Like in theory, that should be okay. And I've done this before, but the output is, it's not really. You still need a dev oversight. You need somebody who understands what's a hallucination and what's not, if you're going to do that.
Exactly. Because sometimes
Yeah.
the outcome is not at all what you intended. Like I've tried it before. And if you don't understand sometimes basic function structure or anything, you can just get some real garbage and you might not know it if you don't understand, like you don't have a foundational knowledge, you're just vibe coding.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was
Right.
doing it this morning and I clicked undo 5 times in a row because it was like, what the heck did you
Yes.
just do?
I'm like, what is this?
Yeah. So there you go.
There's something that's a real taste thing too about content modeling, right? And I think there's probably room for building out something in source control that helps to, I think, give a little bit of inference or extra context rather for that agent to try to assist with modeling. But I don't know.
Modeling, it's hard, man. I've not seen it succeed.
There's kind of an art to that. There really is, because there's always trade-offs, right? And knowing which trade-off to pick, I think it's hard to tell an AI what's enough context so it can make the right selection. Sometimes they can do okay though.
Yeah,
Right.
I think I've noticed the more structured stuff you're going to do, like content modeling, the less successful it is. And the more finger painty it becomes, like code, it actually gets a little better. Like we're now trying to figure out, for example, at Content Stack, you probably know, we have a JS SDK for delivery and a TS one. And so we would love for folks to use the TS one a little bit more because it's just more secure, it's more stable, it helps. The DX is a lot nicer. But we cannot just say, drop this, go there, because you're going to lose 3 weeks of work and your stakeholders are like, hey, no changes happened on the website, but you coded for 3 weeks. That's not going to fly. And so we're now figuring out how can we use AI for people to just paste in their old query with the JS SDK, and it gives you a TS SDK one. You just swap it out and run. And turns out AI is a lot better at that than content modeling. Right? You can just paste a whole bunch of your code and it just rewrites the same code, but then with the TS SDK with the slightly different query stuff you have to do. And it kind of just works.
Yeah. I think when you're doing content modeling, a big part of knowing what's the right answer is understanding really well how your content authors want to interact with the authoring experience. Like that is who you're designing your
That's
content.
the key, actually.
Yes.
Is those authors. And so if you don't have that context, and I don't think AI really does, unless you're somehow feeding it to it, that's the problem.
And I think these are the golden words that Lo and I are always looking for.
Yes.
You worked like Content Stack is a team buy, right? Your content editors just as much use it as the developers.
Oh yeah. At Arke, if I can just toot our horn just a little bit.
Yes, go for it. This
yes,
is the moment.
Please do.
We absolutely design for two audiences mind, right? There is the end user who's consuming content from the digital screen, website, mobile, whatever. But there's also the authors themselves. And if they're not happy with the product, if they're not engaged and able to use it and get their job done and do it quickly, they're not going to be happy with the solution. And that's a real problem. And we see a lot of clients who migrate away from CMSs for that reason. So we want them to be happy and successful.
Absolutely. And I think like people a lot of times, and also AI it's very hard for it to navigate something that straddles a line, right? that straddles the line between computer and human, and content modeling is in both of those spaces at the same time. And really, to get the most efficient content models, it needs to be cross-functional, right? So many times you see sometimes developers create content models, create schemas, having never talked to the people who are actually going to create content with them, right?
Yeah.
So it's not efficient it's efficient to your APIs, right, as a developer, but not efficient to the content teams. And then that causes you have to go back and reiterate on the model that's not feature-based. It's literally because you didn't have the information prior to, so their workflow wasn't in it. And now you have to go and try to backtrack and put that workflow in the model.
Yeah. No, you're so right about that, Lo. I think developers always are thinking about reuse, and maybe sometimes they try to apply that methodology to a content model, and you end up having to author something in 5 different places, and the author's like, what am I doing? So our BAs are very much in tune with that. And I think our BAs and our content modelers, they have a real good partnership to make sure that we're delivering something that the authors will like.
Awesome. Wow, we are 5 minutes over.
Yeah, it went fast. That's a good sign, by
It
the way.
really did. This was awesome. Thank you all so much to Arke. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Arke is Content Stack's Partner of the Year. Congratulations on that. We're so happy to be partners with y'all. And thank you so much for being here and showing us Beacon. We posted the links in the chat. If you want to contribute to Beacon or just try it out, please do. Also, please join the Content Stack Discord community. You can go to community.contentstack.com and join our Discord. You can ask questions in there. You can hang out with us. We're all in there. Yeah. And what else do we have? What else are our requisite marketing things we need to do?
No, we did it. We're good.
We did it.
For me, mainly, it's like I'm excited to try more of Beacon.
Yes.
This is going to be super fun. And maybe not everybody knows, but I'm doing developer experience, but I'm also being somehow put into the position of being the product manager of our CLI and SDK, because that fits so well.
Right.
And so I kind of know a little bit about what's happening with CLI, and I'll make sure that there's not too much overlap, that if there's overlap, that we work together then rather than build something that's very similar, because that's just a waste of effort.
I love that.
And we're really working hard at the moment to making our CLI much more pluggable, to actually have modules you can plug in, and you make your own package on NPM and just push it into the CLI, and it kind of just works. And that also means you can put it on the marketplace. And so there's a big thing coming where something like Beacon can be a very nice addition to if people already know our CLI, you can just plug it in and run. And of course, there's some time here to make sure that all fits in nicely. And also, if you did want to separate the products out, that's also possible. So we're just very excited to see how smooth this is, Chris. Like, congrats. Like, it's really, really good.
It's fantastic.
I'm definitely going to put that on my personal side, because I want my data models, actually.
Okay.
Excellent.
And so let's end on a fun question real quickly before we go. How did the name Beacon come about? Why did you decide to name the CLI tool the Beacon?
Oh, fascinating.
Well,
I don't. Go ahead.
I have an answer. I don't know if it's a fun answer. We theme for some of our products that we've created, and some of these products are internal to Arke, but not all, around our sort of developer kit, if you will, that's applied to Content Stack. And so it has an outdoor wayfinding kind of hiking theme to it. So for instance, our solution that we apply to every Content Stack project is called Basecamp. And we were originally going to call Beacon Compass, but I think there was already a Compass name taken.
Yes.
Okay, we got it. Like what else can we do? So we just a brainstorming session, and we landed on Beacon.
There we go.
Awesome. Well, I really like it. I think maybe it was unintentional, but you calling it Beacon, and that's really a lot of the behavior that it does is super awesome.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to say a quick hi to Angie, who came in at the last moment.
Hi, Angie.
Thanks, everyone. And let's do a lot of cool stuff together as partners.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. This was a great, fun session. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Awesome.
Right. Cheers.
Right.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you for